Well, good morning. I just greet you in the name of the Lord, and I'm sharing a few thoughts from a home that God has given us down here on Beaver Lake in close to Rogers, Arkansas. And I'd like to share a little bit of that and our joy of being able to have the privilege of receiving this gift from the Lord. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how we arrived here, our journey in our lives to come from this place. Let me ask you a question. If Jesus was to ask you to come and work for him, would you do that? When Jesus asks us to come and work for him, that means he's going to compensate us. And normally we think Jesus only asks for volunteers. Come follow me. Well, that's true. But he does ask us to come willingly and freely. But he does promise, I believe, to take care of us. Whether that be through an employment with a company, or sometimes he literally calls us out of secular employment and to trust him to make provision. I believe he calls everybody, not just those who, in a sense, prepare via seminary and Bible school, but he calls people from all walks of life, and he will promise to provide for you if you're willing to trust him. Remember when he sent his disciples out, 2 by 2, he said, don't take anything with you because I want to show you something here. He says, wherever you go, if someone wants to give you some food or a place to stay, accept it. In fact, eat whatever's put in front of you. Now, that would be hard for me if someone was to put apple pie in front of me or something with cooked apple. I have a difficulty with that, but I have actually done that before. But the point being is he said, receive what the Lord provides for you on this journey. The laborer is worthy of his support. Well, many years ago, after I graduated from seminary and I came back and I worked with my father for several years, in 1982, I believe the Lord called me out of any formal church or place where I could receive a steady salary. Some would say, I moved out and began to live by faith. In other words, with an idea in my heart, a vision from God, a promise of provision. I remember the legitimate concern of my father when I talked with him about starting a new ministry, which at that time we called Community Discipleship Ministries. And that very simply was a ministry of making disciples in a small community. And I had this vision that God had given me over the years, somewhat from my experience at Oral Roberts University in the dorm, and reading a lot from a fellow that was named Paul Yonggi Cho. He's changed his name to David Yonggi Cho now, that had at that time was the largest church in the world, probably still is to this day, well over 500,000 members. But they were all located in small home groups, house churches, cell groups. And that vision really stirred my heart. So I launched out with 2 dear friends, actually a total of 4 dear friends. So there was just 6 of us in this small house church. Again, getting back to my father, he said, but Philip, how are you going to support yourself? And the truth of the matter at that time was I didn't have any at least formal way of doing it, just trusting God to provide for me. And one of our friends, the 2 couples that were going with us, were willing to say, we will help you to have groceries on the table, so to speak. And that was a wonderful promise. That was really all I needed. I had a crazy idea as well as the support of some friends. That was our beginning. And we had one house church, and it began to grow. People began to come. And then we started another house church. People began to come to that, and all we did, we put a basket by the door and said, if this is blessing you, we'd appreciate your gifts. And so God provided. Literally within 4 months, we were provided all we needed to pay our expenses every week, simply through the gifts of people in these 2 different house churches. So God was faithful. And I believe he called me to go work for him. And it's in my heart to help other people to have this vision, whether it be part-time or full-time, to trust God, to allow them to become workers in the field, in the kingdom, in the vineyard. The harvest is plentiful. Plenty of harvest out there. We just need more workers. And I believe God is not just looking for people who are willing to follow to be disciples, but to be workers. And if you're a worker, there is the anticipation and the willingness to receive compensation. And some will be given the grace by God to eventually leave their vocation. Some, I know many retired folks that are blessed because they have saved up all their lives. And some of those, God wants to become workers in his harvest field. And he wants to compensate them. He wants to bless them financially. See, our Lord is a giving God. You can't outgive him. And the Lord's compensation, if I will, the provision for you to have money to pay your bills and buy your groceries, these are all gifts. All my life, I haven't really received a salary. I've received gifts from people who gave to the church, who gave into this ministry that God has given me. And here we are, sitting in a house that we're able to use, and it's a beautiful house. I might show you some of it at this point. It has actually a total of 5 bedrooms. And 3.5 baths. We'd never imagined this when we started back in 1982, you know. And there's some things that God has done over the years that we did not anticipate. I love the verse where he says, now unto him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or think or even imagine. To him be the glory. Now, those of you who are listening to me, may I ask you a question? Have you ever thought about becoming not just a disciple of Jesus, but a worker in his kingdom, in his work, in his mission, and trusting him to provide for you? And as I said, one of the desires of my heart, I'd love to show you how to do that. And I have a vision for a ministry to see many, many people learn how to receive, not only give, which I hope you're doing anyway, but learn how to receive from the Lord. I love it when Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, no church has shared with me in this ministry of giving and receiving. Now we think about the ministry of giving, but do we think about the ministry of receiving? If the Lord is a giving God, then shouldn't we also anticipate the possibility of receiving from him as well? I don't think that's greed. You know, you've got to be warned about greed. This is not another scheme, you know, to get rich. It's just simply a response to a loving God who wants us to be obedient and to make disciples. And would it not be better for many people to be making disciples full-time or even part-time? And they could be freed up from their secular work, from their fishing, as Peter, James, and John were. Or like Matthew, he was freed up from collecting taxes, being an accountant, or a crook in his case. You know, Paul, yes, he made tents and did that part-time, but eventually, as soon as he could, he set it aside so he could devote himself full-time to the work of the ministry. I believe in these latter days that God has put it in the hearts of many people. Deep inside, you said, I would give anything to be able to work for Jesus in the ministry, but you don't know how. The only ways you've heard of before is, well, I guess I need to go to Bible school. Well, that's good. I mean, if you've got the time and the money to invest in that, by all means, I think that's a good investment. And there's many opportunities online these days. Or you could raise your support and become a missionary or join a missions organization. Now, neither of those are what God has put in my heart or have done with Kathy and I. We've simply begun a ministry, began to serve, gather people, win them to Christ, and gather them together in a small group. And then we simply allowed God to give to us through them, the ones we ministered to. By God's grace, we never put any pressure on them. God just moved their own hearts, and we were faithful with the finances that God has given us over the years. So let me come back to you a little bit and ask you the question, have you ever considered being a worker in the kingdom? Are you praying for that? See, Jesus said in Luke chapter 10, verse 2, beseech, beg, cry out to the Lord to thrust forth workers into his harvest. I believe that's very similar to the Great Commission. Go make disciples. What kind of disciples? Well, God has put in my heart to make workers and to give them the ability to work, to train them how to do it. I thank God for the people, and most specifically my father, who trained me how to do the work of the ministry. I followed him around, I watched him, I imitated him. I think of Sunday, my youth director, years ago. God used her to help me to learn how to do the ministry. But I want to challenge some of you that are listening to this video. Have you ever thought about that? Some of you who have retired, you've still got lots of energy and lots of life left. It's not necessarily to be wasted, if I can say it that way, on just traveling and looking at the sights. Sure, do that. But what about putting some energy into the work of the kingdom? What about learning how to facilitate a small group and allowing God to meet your expenses for his ministry? I'm asking God to give me ways, and I have many ideas that I've put down on paper to bless people who are working in the ministry, to show them how to do that. Wouldn't that be exciting? And to see people coming to Christ, to have spiritual sons and daughters who in turn are making spiritual sons and daughters, making disciples, and they in turn are learning how to make disciples. And based upon the ability of each individual and the motivation that God has given you, your ministry can be small, a little part-time ministry, or it could be large. And God could bless the minister, the missionary, whatever is an appropriate title, not only to minister to a few, but if you have the ability to train them and equip them, and then equip 2 or 3 generations of disciple makers, you could have a large ministry. And by virtue of videos and writing, email, and using the internet these days, this ministry could spread literally around the world. So, and you never know how God is going to bless you, how he's going to compensate you, how he wants to give to you. Now again, this is all predicated on the idea that first you've learned how to give. Give, and it will be given unto you. Freely you have received, freely give. So there's a call to give. It doesn't just happen. Whatever God gives you, always give back the first part, the seed, if you will, and he will give more to you. Why? So you can give back, and then you can do his work. So, very simply put, has God put it in your heart to be a worker? A worker who receives his wages, who receives compensation, whether small or perhaps large, depends upon the nature of the ministry he's calling you into. But I promise you, he will meet every need you have according to his riches in glory. Philippians chapter 4, verse 19. And my God shall supply. But that's, I believe, based upon if you do your work, if you give your part, you can claim that promise. You can believe him that that promise is true for you. So consider being a worker in the kingdom, not just a disciple. And I believe that you, like Kathy and I, will be surprised at what the Lord does, what the Lord gives.
Well, I'd like to give you a little idea of some of the blessings that God has given. This is looking towards the front door of the house, the stairs that go upstairs to several rooms. This is one of the bedrooms here, over there in the living area, which is pretty neat. And then I'll take you outside here, which is the part that I particularly enjoy. This is the outside. Beautiful morning here, this Sunday morning. And this is looking from the back deck, that where you have a nice little seating arrangement here. And if I point in this direction, you can see several tables where I hope that be a wonderful place for a retreat. And you see several small groups there, kind of grab my thoughts. And then as you travel over here, we have a little grill and another deck and a place to eat. As we look down this way, we're relatively close to another house. And you can see the lake in the background and Rocky Branch Marina. Some of the other area, by God's grace, we're being given that land at the back of this property. So I'll take you over here to show you some other areas. Beautiful part. Another house on the other side. So we feel really blessed. Indeed. So these are great blessings, and you know the Lord is a blessing God, and so we're very thankful, and indeed, truly the verse that comes to my mind is, now unto him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to his power that works within us. Well, it's Sunday morning, and you're probably watching this video possibly later today, but we're just so thankful to the Lord and excited about what is coming up, the balance of this year and moving into next year. I hope you're excited. I know these are chaotic times as far as our country goes, but the kingdom moves forward. God's blessing continues on, and he will help us navigate these times of difficulty and even provide abundant blessing through them. So don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe in Jesus. Well, God bless you, and let's give him the praise and the glory